Hello and welcome to Lantern Lane Stories. Tonight's story is The Boy Who Wrote Truth. Havana smelled like coffee and the sea. Every morning the harbor wind swept through the old city and carried both smells together, the warm, roasted smell of coffee rising from the doorsteps and the wide, clean smell of open water drifting in from the bay. José was awake before anyone else in the house. He was the oldest of 8 children, so the quiet mornings belonged to him alone. He sat on the front step of the house on Calle Paula Street, and watched Havana come alive. The cobblestones were dark from last night's rain. A small orange cat crossed the street in 3 quick leaps. From behind the rooftops, a church bell rang. 1, 2, 3, then silence and birds. That church was the Church of the Holy Guardian Angel, the very church where baby José had been baptized, just a short walk away. Its bell was the first sound he ever remembered. His mother, Anna, had come from the Canary Islands, far out in the Atlantic Ocean. She had a soft lilt in her voice that sounded almost like music. She hummed while she swept the doorstep, a tune José could never quite name. His father, Mariano, was a soldier who worked at a jail building nearby. Every morning, Mariano put on his uniform and walked out the gate, his boots tapping down the cobblestones. Every evening, he came home smelling of iron and dust. Life on Calle Paula was not easy. There was not much money, and the small house was always full of noise. But in the early morning, with the harbor gleaming at the end of the street and the city just starting to hum, José felt something he could not yet name. He noticed that words did things. A fruit seller on the corner called out, "Mangoes, sweet mangoes," and you could almost taste them. The priest at the church spoke in a slow, low voice, and the whole room went still. His mother's humming said something that no Spanish word could say exactly. One morning, José found a piece of brown paper in the gutter, crinkled and a little damp. He smoothed it on his knee and picked up a charcoal stub from beside the cooking fire, and he wrote what he saw. Mango, bell, bird, sea, home, 5 words. But they felt like holding something precious in both hands. When José was about 12 years old, a teacher noticed something unusual about him. The teacher's name was Rafael María de Mendive. He was a poet, a real one whose own books had been published and read all over Havana. He had gentle, watchful eyes and always a smudge of ink on the side of his writing hand. One afternoon, when the other boys had gone home for lunch, Mendive held up one of José's exercises. "You write differently from the others," Mendive said. José looked at his sandals. "Is that bad, sir?" "No." Mendive set the paper down carefully on the desk. "It is the opposite of bad. You see something, a street, a bird, a feeling, and then you find exactly the right word for it. That is a rare thing." After that, Mendive began to lend José books, poetry from Spain, letters from great thinkers, stories from countries José had never seen. He read them by the last light of the evening, crouched near the window. When candles cost too much, he read by the soft glow of the gas lamp outside on the street. Mendive taught him something important. Words were not just decoration, not just pretty sounds. "A hammer builds a house," Mendive said one afternoon, tapping the desk. "A word in exactly the right place can build an idea, and an idea once built can change things." José thought about that for a long time. He started to write more seriously. He used the backs of old envelopes. He filled the margins of newspapers his father brought home. He pressed words into any small space he could find. His mother found scraps of his writing tucked inside his shoes one morning. "What is all this?" she asked, unfolding a piece in the morning light. "Just thoughts," said José. She read it slowly, standing very still in the open doorway. "These are not just thoughts," she said quietly. These are feelings. She folded it carefully and handed it back to him. By the time Jose was 16 years old, the air in Havana had changed. It was 1869. Out in the countryside, Cubans had begun to fight for independence from Spain. In the city, Spanish soldiers marched through the streets in pairs. Their boots rang on the wet cobblestones, a sharp, steady sound that said, "We are in charge here." Some of Jose's classmates had chosen to join the Spanish side. Jose walked the streets of old Havana and thought. He thought of Calle Paula in the mornings, the smell of coffee and the sea. He thought of the church bell and the orange cat and his mother's humming. He thought, "This island is alive, it should be free." He went home and sat at the small wooden table by the window. The harbor was dark below, only the tiny lights of distant ships moving slowly through the black water. He dipped his pen, he wrote a poem. He wrote that Cuba deserved to breathe free air. He wrote it carefully, not as an angry shout, but as a clear, steady truth. Mendive had taught him the clearest truth needs the fewest words. A few days later, the poem appeared in a small magazine. It was called La Patria Libre, the Free Homeland. Then, one evening near the end of the year, there was a knock at the door. It was not a gentle knock. 3 hard raps, and then voices outside, and the clank of swords at their sides. José's mother opened the door. Spanish soldiers stood on the step. They had come for the boy who had written the poem. José was 16 years old. He looked at his mother before they led him away. She stood very still. Her hands were pressed together at her chest. She did not cry out, but José saw everything in her eyes. He carried those eyes with him into the dark. The prison was colder than José expected, even in Havana. Through the stone walls, he could hear the harbor, the same harbor he had watched from Calle Paula all his life. The water sounded the same birds called at dawn, low and steady over the bay. The judges had sentenced him to 6 years of hard labor. 6 years. He was not yet 17, but the soldiers and the judges had made one mistake. They thought they had locked away his words. They had not. Inside José, the words kept living quiet now, like seeds in the dry season, waiting for rain. He thought about Cuba. He thought about Mendive and his ink-stained hand. He thought about what words could build. After 7 months, his sentence was cut short. But José was not allowed to stay in Cuba. He was put on a ship and told not to come back. The island grew smaller and smaller behind him as the ship moved out to sea. He was 17 years old, watching his home disappear into the distance. In the years that followed, José traveled far. He went to Spain, he went to Mexico, he went to New York, where the winters were nothing like Havana's warm, salt-aired nights. Everywhere he went, he wrote essays, letters, speeches, and poems. He spent his whole life working to help Cuba become free. And among everything he wrote some poems just for children. One of them became so beloved that Cuban children have sung it ever since. It begins like this: I want to cultivate a white rose in July as in January for the sincere friend who gives me his honest hand. It is called La Rosa Blanca, the white rose. It is not a poem about soldiers or prisons or hard labor. It is a poem about friendship, about offering kindness to everyone, even to those who have not been kind to you. The boy who was taken away in the night for writing the truth grew up to write words that children carry in their hearts. If you visit Havana today, you can walk down Calle Paula. The small house where José was born is still there on the same street where a young boy once wrote his first 5 words in charcoal on a crinkled piece of paper. And every child in Cuba knows his name and knows his white rose. And so, Havana also slowly fell asleep. Good night.